How many elevator rides do you recall? Maybe because the small town of Idabel, Oklahoma, where I grew up, only had one elevator that I knew of. I can still recall my first elevator ride. But for the most part, elevator rides are uneventful and not newsworthy. There may be music that plays in the background, a polite, obligatory hello if someone joins you. We've all had the experience of being in an awkward position when the stranger gets on the elevator and wants to have a full-blown conversation. That feels weird because there is a code to riding an elevator. You get on, get quiet, and get off. And because most people abide by that code, most elevator rides aren't newsworthy. But I would like to share with you a story of an elevator ride so significant that the impact of it is still being felt 100 years later. And upon closer examination, there are some lessons around emotional intelligence that have been missed. And that is a problem. So allow me to be your elevator operator of sorts. And together we'll make some new discoveries and perhaps change some perspective. To begin, we're going to go underground. We're headed into the basement. Now it gets a little darker here, and for that reason, not a lot of people like to go. But the truth is, you wouldn't appreciate the light if it were not for the darkness. So watch your step as you get off. The smoke makes it difficult to see, and the embers can still cause degrees of burn. You find yourself in the middle of 34 blocks of destruction, ruin, burned to the ground. Churches, schools, businesses, homes, and even people set aflame. Now, sadness would be a fitting emotion if Mother Nature was the culprit. But this was done. This destruction was at the hands of men who were emotionally unintelligent, who suffered from perception bias, who were fearful, and they lacked some facts. Today it's known as simply Tulsa, but where you're standing was once known as the Greenwood District, Black Wall Street, an area thriving, an area in such abundance and affluence that it was called the Black Wall Street. The year's 1921, and you have men and women who are one generation removed from slavery, who through collaboration, resilience, and effort decided to be personally responsible for the lives that they wanted to live. And through those pioneers, greatness was the experience. Study the pioneers of the Greenwood District, and it is a masterclass in emotional intelligence, self-reliance, responsibility, awareness, motivation, social skill, and empathy. So what happened? Why are we standing here in the ruins instead of experiencing more of this area's innovation? What if I told you that it started with an elevator ride? That on this elevator ride, a button was pushed that was not on the elevator itself, but a button, a trigger was pushed in the psyche of human beings. Remember this name, Dick Rowland. Dick Rowland was an orphaned teenager who had become an entrepreneur. And he saw a need and decided to fill the need as a shoe shine boy. And he was so good at it. It is reported that he could shine a shoe so well that you might be able to see your reflection in the wingtips or the Oxfords that you were wearing. Dick Rowland's complexion was a lot like mine. And he went to work daily, shining the shoes of men in business in downtown Tulsa. And on a particular day, he needed a break from being crouched over and shining shoes. Now remember, the year is 1921. And so Dick Rowland could not use the same restroom of the people whose shoes he shined. And so he had to go across the street to the Drexel building. And at the top floor of the Drexel building, there was the restroom where his skin color could use the restroom. Now, I found it interesting that you would send the disenfranchised, those who were considered fractionally human, to the top floor. In my experience, the top floor was where everyone was trying to get to. But here in 1921, the top floor was the place where colored people could use the restroom. How come? Well, Elijah Otis had only recently introduced a braking system for elevators. And so it was actually more dangerous. But on that day, Dick Rowland goes on the elevator. He goes up, and on his way back down, he's getting off of the elevator. And as he's getting off, he trips. He slips. He missteps. And when he did, he bumped into that day's elevator operator, Sarah Page. Have you ever been bumped? Has anyone ever accidentally kind of knocked you off balance? What'd you do? Maybe you dropped the things that you were holding. Or you gasped because it caught you off guard. Well, Sarah screamed. And when she screamed, it got the attention of an observer. The observer turned to where the noise had come from. He sees Sarah, who happens to be white. He makes eye contact with Dick Rowland. Dick runs. Now, for those who would suggest that, well, if Dick had did nothing wrong, then why did he run? And I would say, well, take your chances. As a black orphaned teenager in 1921, your word against the word of this white observer. So Dick runs. He runs back to Greenwood. But later that night, he's arrested for sexual assault. And he's in the Tulsa City Jail. And there's a mob that has gathered outside. They want Dick Rowland released to them, the vigilantes, because they have a way of taking care of this type of business. And the community of Greenwood knows that Dick is incarcerated, and they go to the courthouse to make sure that he doesn't get released to these vigilantes. And when they arrive, they see the mob. And so, seeing that they are outnumbered, they retreat back to Greenwood. And they returned. And when they return, the number has grown to over 1,500. Violence ensues. And so they retreat again back to Greenwood. But now the mob is under the impression that, well, wait a second, they're going to go get more reinforcements, not just from Greenwood, but from surrounding areas, surrounding towns. We're in trouble. And so, destruction begins to take place. Where literally airplanes are rented out and bombs are dropped on this 34-block area, set afire, blazing high, women, children, it did not matter. Complete destruction of this area. How come? Fear, perception bias, and an absence of the facts. We stand here not because Mother Nature willed it, but because it's what happens when fear overrides. But what is also the case is that those perpetrators were guilty of being tricked. Have you ever been tricked? Have you ever been misled? Well, here is the greatest trick that has ever been played on mankind, and it continues today. And the trick is convincing people that a disadvantage to one is not a disadvantage to another. What those in South Tulsa did not understand is that destruction in North Tulsa represents also destruction in South Tulsa. We cannot get around it. I cannot do harm to you without it also being harmful to me. And so they had been tricked, misled, and because of it, destruction ensued. Let's get back on the elevator now. We've spent enough time underground. We're going to go to a higher level. Let's go take in the view from the top floor. I want you to see and notice a world of possibilities. A community where people are seen, and because they are seen, they are inspired. Because ultimately, it's what we all want, is to be seen and to be known. You look out and you see a world where there is absolute responsibility. Absolute responsibility says that no matter where we've been and no matter what we've been through, what comes next is up to us. To take responsibility does not suggest that I have to take blame for what happened. It is not to say that I must own it as my fault. But it does suggest that I am willing to own that what comes next is up to me. Why? Because you will never change what you are unwilling to own. As you look out and you see or imagine a world where people are seen for who they are, and they recognize that in and of itself, that is enough. I recall a recent incident where a friend of mine, Rex, he says to me, "Cortland, I just don't see you as a black person." I thought, well, Rex, that's odd. I obviously am, and you're not blind. I said to him, please take it from me. That is not a sign of enlightenment. It's not received as a compliment. But I'm curious, what do you mean by that? And in his eagerness to explain it, he said, well, you know, it's the way you talk and how you dress. I'm sorry, I just don't see you as a black person. And I said, so essentially what you're saying is that because of how I speak and because of how I dress, I don't fit your paradigm of an African American man. I don't fit your paradigm of what it is to be black. And rather than shift or change your perception, rather than shift your paradigm, you make me the outlier. Because Rex was a friend, I shared that with him. And today he's grateful. Because he began to explore what does inform our viewpoints and our opinions. What informs our biases? Every human being wants to be seen. And perhaps the greatest gift that you could give them is to recognize or have them know that you see them and that who they are in and of themselves is enough. So much of what we have occurring in the world are men and women believing that they are deserving and worthy of love only if they perform, or only by what they possess or what they own. But I declare that you are worthy of love and acceptance intrinsically. You are worthy of love and acceptance by your birthright. Imagine a world that understands that. Let's get back on the elevator. It's about time to go. And on our way back down, we're at the ground floor now, but before you leave, consider what you've seen, not only in the basement, and what happens when a community lies, but also what you saw as possible when you're willing to operate from responsibility. And before you exit, as you go out, I want to encourage you with some specific things that you can do to impact and influence not only race relations, but the idea of people being seen and being known. And we can, in fact, use the elevator as a metaphorical reference. Have you ever had that experience of you're running towards the elevator, and just as you get there, you see that the elevator doors are closing? And just as you're about to there's a hand that interrupts the sensor, or maybe they just push the button to open the door again. And you're gladly stepping on like, oh, thank you so much. Remember that feeling? That's the feeling of being seen. One thing that you can do is be the person who holds the door for someone else. I want to encourage you to visit some different floors. See what's happening in places that are not your own. That might look like you go to an area of town where you don't live. Eat at a restaurant where the cuisine that is being served is not what you grew up on. And before leaving, go say thank you to the chef who is passionately living his or her dream. Visit some other floors. Expand your perspective. Because the truth is, choice is a function of awareness. I can only gauge or judge why you made that choice if I know what you are aware of. So again, hold the door open. Visit some other floors. And number 3, here's what I want you to do. Think about that feeling when someone is willing to assist you in getting where you desire to go. And know that you can provide that for someone else. Be a person who's willing to ask, where are you headed? And then do what you can to assist them in getting there. Hold the door open. Visit some different floors. And to also be one who's willing to ask, where are you headed? And then be willing to assist in getting them there. Thank you.